நம்ம கிரியேட்டிவிட்டி பிளானட் சேனலில் நிறைய ஃபன்னி வீடியோஸ், கேம் வீடியோஸ், வீலாக்ஸ் அண்ட் நேச்சர் லவ்ஸ்ன்ற நிறைய என்டர்டெயின்மெண்ட்டான வீடியோஸ் இருக்குது. எல்லாருக்கும் கண்டிப்பாக பிடிக்கும். ஸோ சேனலை மறக்காமல் சப்ஸ்கிரைப் பண்ணி வச்சுக்கோங்க அண்ட் பெல் பட்டனையும் அழுத்தி வச்சுக்கோங்க. அப்போ தான் நாங்கள் போடுற எல்லா வீடியோஸோட நோட்டிஃபிகேஷன் உங்களுக்கு வரும். உங்களுக்கு கண்டிப்பாக நாங்கள் போடுற எல்லா வீடியோஸும் பிடிக்கும். ஸோ லைக்கும் பண்ணி வச்சுக்கோங்க. அப்புறம் மறக்காமல் உங்கள் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ்க்கு ஷேரும் பண்ணிடுங்க.
Hi friends, today we are going to see the third chapter of the book A Sweeping Look at Vedanta, written by Swami Chinmayananda. If you need first and second chapter, you can see in my previous videos of the same channel. The title of the third chapter is The Technique of Self-Development. In the scheme of our talk, we analyzed at the outset the visible world around us and discovered therein the plan of nature to be nothing but an attempt to bring about a slow and steady unfoldment of consciousness. Again, we tried to discuss the method by which this unfoldment can be hastened and how this provided a greater share of happiness to the individual and society. We also found in the last chapter that religion has become impractical and meaningless to our generation, not because of intrinsic hollowness of spiritual truth and ineffectiveness of psychological declaration, but mainly due to our own inability to keep a spirit of consistent pursuit of those wisdom directions. Now we shall try to discover whether there is any technique or logic and scientific in the scriptures of world religion, pursuing which an individual can develop himself into more potent relaying stations of consciousness or awareness, merely because of cheers of old has declared at utopian theory that consciousness can be forced to manifest more and more out of an individual. One should not jump to conclusion that everyone will be benefited by it, unless those very cheers had given us some practical technique, by following which each one of us can accomplish this last lap in the psychological progress. All these theories should amount to nothing more than a figure of imagination. In case we can prove that there is no definite technique of perfection incorporated in the religion of the world, then we shall conclude that religion at the best is only an ideal song sung by a team daydreamer. Thereafter we shall certainly be justified in all our careless neglect, and we shall also deserve to be heartily congratulated for our total neglect of those high value preached in the great book of the world, the Quran, the Bible, the Chant Avesta or the Veda. In our analysis of life, we found that moment to moment, the individual, the subject, in his contact with the worldly circumstance, the object gains for himself in his reactions. The experiences constitute the stuff of life. If the experiences are healthy and truthful, the life is successful and noble. If, on the other hand, the experiences gained by individual in his life are all abortive and insignificant, his life indeed a great waste, tragic, melancholy, and despairing. The material scientists of the world do give a complete explanation of the world outside in their objective sciences, but the world outside is only half the picture of the entire life. Since life is to be estimated by total experiences gained, there must be certainly in our study of life a thorough enquiry made of both the experiencer and the experienced. The mere knowledge of the world of object, is only half the picture. It cannot be complete unless we know all about the other partner in the business of life, the subject. Without a complete knowledge of subject, no healthy readjustment of life is possible. The secular world refuses to understand the importance of the individual personality, and in it thrives the secret ulcer of its sorrow. The master intellect of the ancient Upanishad have not ignored this most important limb of life. In fact, they have given so much thought to the subject that today's world, educated mainly in the objective knowledge of science, would easily come to the wrong conclusion that in Upanishad the master were exclusively engaged with the subject, even to the today neglect of the object worlds outside. This criticism is only a hasty one. The one intensively we study the psychological literature, the most sincerely we try to live up to those ideals, the clearer it becomes to us that the seers of old were not in any sense uninterested in life, but we deliberately trying to bring into our life a new vigor and blessing through a subtle process of tapping the unlimited resources that are lying dormant today in bosom of each individual. In their inquiry of the subject, they came to analyze the personality of man. To materialistic world of the modern age, an individual is only a physical body. To our politicians, economists, and scientists, each one of us is but a physical structure. They recognize only the physical personality. Their science deals with the purity of health or happiness of only the body. To them, a nation is constituted of its population. Except in their educational activities, the state of the world today do not reckon at all the mental aspect of man. Even that the mind is educated or developed only as a mean for a greater happiness of physical structure. Thus, preoccupied with the physical personality, the materialistic psychology has come to misguide the generation into more and more confusion and despair. To the great cheers of truth, spiritualism, each individual is not merely a physical entity. According to them, each individual is a four in one personality. According to them, a man has certainly a physical existence, but in him are still three more layers of individuality, as a mental, the intellectual, and spiritual. All these four personalities are, as it were, telescoped into each other, so that for the gross external physical structure, for the purpose of cultural analysis, he has to be considered as four entities bundled up into one. The failure of materialism in finally readjusting the world or providing a social order of things and bringing out the maximum happiness to the maximum number can directly be traced to this misconceptions regarding the individual unity of society. Materialism strives in order to bring about the external world of favorable environment in which physical body could feel completely happy. It is this self-founderous materialistic psychology philosophy that has given rise to modern cry of socialism and communism, whose only goal seems to be to provide everyone with plenty of food, clothing, and shelter. I am not saying here in any way that the nation has everything to satisfy these primary needs of its citizen. For from its but to claim this in itself as the very goal of the life, as end all and be all of life, is to misunderstand the needs of man. A mere satisfaction of physical body alone will not and cannot satisfy the individual. Where we but animal entity is no way better than the buffaloes in our backyard. Certainly we would have been very very happy in having got a large amount of food to eat, good shelter and good physical comfort. But unfortunately man does not possess mere body alone. He has other facilities and their demands. When when the primary need for the minimum comfort of the body are satisfied, there comes the demand for of mind and intellect, the demand to satisfy our thirst of love, for mercy, for kindness, or for charity, the thirsty for beauty, for perfection, for knowledge, or for accomplishment. Again, we find that even when a man is well accomplished, he has also ample changes for his intellect, mental, and physical well-being yet there in him, remaining the need or the urge to seek a greater happiness. There is a silent call from the spirit. The spiritual entity is not satisfied with the physical comfort or mental occupation or intellectual accomplishment. It is still looking ahead irresistibly to the beyond the body, mind, and intellect, into the ampler field of immense love and endless beauty. It wants to break asunder all the limitations imposed upon it by the frail body, the limited mind, and the shackled intellect. It internally seeks fresh field and pastures new. This eternal thirst of fully developed individual is called in the spiritual literature as the eternal urge of the spirit, the unrest of the soul. To satisfy this comes the great institute called religion. Here I mean religion is its ample and truer sense of the term, and not the decadent religion that are seen lingering in our own times. In the fourth wheel of the car, are we synchronized properly but are allowed to run according to their own will and pleasure? Imagine what would be the fate of the body of a car if each of four horses harnessed to a chariot were to take its own path. Certainly the chariot is bound to be ricked. Similarly, if each individual is constituted into four different and distinct personalities, unless they are integrated properly, the music of life shall certainly not be with us. The song of soul can be heard and lived only by one who has, by careful method of intellect application, learned to live an integrated life. This perfect integration of life shall certainly come into the life of every one of us and when nature her in her slow method take up and mold us. It may probably take several millennia before man reaches the state of perfection. Those of you who feel satisfied by the slow process can stop reading. For to those, the religion has no serious and urgent message at all. But to the spiritualist who is impatient, who is seeking for method by which he can seek on the gas and dart for forward towards the goal, to such a impatient enthusiast, to such a ripened being, religion advises the great technique, the technique of self-perfection, the scientific method by which willfully an individual can train himself and thereby hasten his own evolution, are the contents of the active part of all religions. Every religion has two distinct parts, one mere ideal and ideologies are explained in the philosophic part, and other portion wherein the practical method are discussed. The highly philosophical and intellectual process by which an individual can thus hasten his evolution constitutes the yoga. Here you must specially notice that yoga is not attempt to bring about a longer nose or a broader ear, nor is it an attempt to add to your physical height, nor to reduce your fat content. True yoga has nothing to do, in fact, with the physical structure. Yoga may, in its other process, make use of the physical structure, but its main goal is the development of mind and the intellect. Herein, the great disease of old or voicing forth only what Darwin has repeated in his own conclusion, that the man in his physical form has reached perfection as a biological structure. We have no more any tail to drop now, nor to do. We need wait patiently now for the development of a pair of horns. As far as the physical structure is concerned, nature has fulfilled herself in the beauty form of the human frame. Hereafter, all development can only be the development of the mind and intellect, together called the subtle body. So long as the beings were waiting on the ladder of evolution for the development of their physical structure, they were living under the motive force of self-preservation. To them, kill, loot, procure, you must somehow preserve yourself, seems to have been the law of life. But when the being in its slow progress has come up to the ladder growth, to the landing ground of the human, nature seems to declare, friend, the physical form has reached its perfection. Hereafter thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not loot, thou shalt love, and live to serve all, and strive to be good and all, even if thereby thou hast to perish in the life. For thereafter the individual can progress only in the mind and intellect towards the greater plans of life, promised in such terms as supermanhood, godhood, or selfhood. Till now I have been trying to give you a picture of psychological content of the Hindu scriptures. The vision of seers are indeed quite charming, quite convincing. But if there are only mere vision, we, the practical men of today, shall certainly have nothing to do with them. Thus, when we inquire for the practical method by which their promised perfection state can be brought about into our own life, we find that the great seers have left sufficient details for all truth seekers to continue diligently their spiritual pilgrimage. These techniques, so long considered as mere cock and bull story, unscientific and superstitious, have today the sanction of the experience data and the support of the scientific knowledge of the West. As a matter of fact, compared with the detail of observation, the thoroughness of their argument and the wisdom of their conclusion, the great yogis of the world seems to have had a greater mastery over the subject than the modern scientists and psychologists of the West. No doubt, compared with Yoga Shastra compared with even the rudimentary religion textbook of the world, the scientific psychology of the modern world, even as at its best, read as mere primary textbook on the theme of the subject. In this discussion of yoga, if I go more and more into the Hinduism, it is not because of deliberate attempt on my part to ignore the other religion of the world. All religion point out a definite technique of yoga for its faithful members to follow and grow. But of all the religion of the world, Hinduism alone gives us the most satisfying science and technique. And as I am talking to the people of age of science and technology, I do not feel justified in ignoring the great wealth of science in my anxiety to show my universality. This statement may be considered as as a challenge by other religions. I would request them to understand that I am talking now not from a pulpit to in a temple courtyard, not a church hall, not under the dome of the mosque. I am not talking in a temple of knowledge to the students of science. I have nothing to do with low religious bickering. In Hinduism, unlike in other religions of the world, we find four distinct and seemingly different paths or method of reaching the same goal. The four paths are not, in fact, contradictory to each other, but they are parallel footpaths, each complementary to the other in accommodating the crowd. In the majority of other religions, we find only one beaten out path, one narrow trail, wherein all the beliefs have to crowd themselves into and jog all along. For example, in Christianity, we have only one right royal path, the path of devotion or the path of meek surrender. So, too, in many of our religion of the world. But in Hinduism, we find four different paths: the path of devotion, the path of knowledge, the path of action, and the path of mysticism. In the highly scientific treatment of life, the great rishis of old could, in their total detachment from it, classify mankind into four distinct classes, and they classified men into four groups. On an analysis of his action, we find that every man is motivated by two different phenomena or influences, namely of the head and the heart. On the basis of these instruments, the master divided the entire mankind into four parts: a men of pure heart, a men of pure head, men of EQ developed head and heart, and men of less evolved head and heart. It is obvious that there can be no further group. In short, if any one of us find that he did not fall in any of the first three groups, he shall certainly find himself to belong to the fourth group. There is no escape, simply because we are all men. If there is one being of human shape living in the world, he shall certainly come to claim his place at least in one of these psychological spiritual groups, in satisfying subtly and fully all mental attitude, emotional taste and intellectual statures of this group. We have the four paths. Devotion or love is the path. Bhakti yoga for the man of heart. The path of knowledge, Jnana yoga, to satisfy the man of head. The path of action, Karma yoga, for the man of head. For the man of head, heart, department, temperament, and mystic path, Hatha Yoga will evolve the last group and make them fit for entering into any one of the other three groups. Misconceptions and ignorance in us have provided today the superstitious belief in us that religion or spiritual perfection is available only for few strange individuals. The present day generation think that in order to gain this perfection, it is necessary that they should run away from the life into the jungle, and that they must live an inhuman life. There are most strange bedfellow facing circumstances, unnatural and superhuman. People educated and cultured have asked me, do you then up in the Himalayas milk your own tiger, etc.? These wrong impressions are only the stink rising from the dustbin of our own ignorance. It is not a fact that Bible of the world has ever sanctioned man such a devotion from life. It may recommended a temporary re-divorce from life. It may recommended a temporary retreatment and advise the individual to have a quieter place for the higher contemplations. Even this is only for few specializing one, and that too for a fixed time. But religion is not as existing diverse from life. It is only a method of quiet searching and deliberate self-adjustment whereby an individual so cultured and perfected can come back to the world to face its more efficiency and more fully. In the fourth part so far discussed, we need not be a great philosopher or scientist or a logician, or nor need we be great psychologists to understand that the attempt is to gain a greater control over the mind. Any practitioner in any one of the paths in the spiritual scheme will certainly come to have a greater mastery over his mind, and this mastery over the mind end in a greater and surer integrations of his personality. And the more one get integrated in the mind, the more dynamic becomes one's intellect. Thus purified, the mind and intellect equipment gains a great efficiency and great power of flight, making us of such a preparation pair of wings. The individual soar higher into the brighter realms of spiritual perfection. How it is done, how it is accomplished, shall be the theme for us further discussion, when we shall see how far these wings can take us and where will they exactly start falling us. Thank you. By now the third chapter is done. We shall see the fourth chapter in the next video.